Hey everybody, we're back in the shanty. I know it's not our normal day. I missed a couple of our normal days. As you know, the shanty was being renovated. Here's the renovation in case you're interested. Yep, that's the new shanty. Used to be my desk there, now it's bookshelves. But we're back in the shanty. We're ready to go. And we got to do this real quick because in about 30 minutes, some guys are coming to take one of those trees down, not because I want it down, but because it's dead. And of course, we got interrupted by the dog, and now you can see we're not in the shanty anymore, and we're not in the shanty anymore because the tree guy showed up early. And I don't want to be in the shanty when a tree falls on my head. Plus, they're really noisy. If you've ever had a tree taken down, you know the chainsaws and all that jazz. So what are we going to talk about today, and why are we doing this on a different day? We're doing it on a different day because the state of Michigan issued a couple of helpful guidances, if you will, on the Earned Sick Time Act. And we were hoping the state would go ahead and do this, and they did go ahead and do it. And they issued two things. The first thing they issued was a PowerPoint presentation. Sean Egan at Leo, who's the Deputy Director of Labor, issued a PowerPoint presentation. It's dated August 27, and it goes through the statute. Basically tells us things we already knew from the statute. But more importantly, what the state issued was a set of frequently asked questions. I will put a link to that right down here so you guys can go see those frequently asked questions. But the frequently asked questions, in addition to giving us stuff we already knew, like who's an employer, basically everybody but the United States, when do people start earning this stuff, the February 21st, 2025, and what's a benefit year, it's whatever 12-month year you pick, and all kinds of stuff that we've already talked about. There's at least 3 questions in this FAQ that I wanted to cover that do ask some of the questions that you guys and we, frankly, had about this statute. So let me go through that real quick, and we'll get you those answers. And then if you have any additional questions, of course, you can give us a call, and we could talk about those issues. So the first question that I think is helpful from this FAQ is, what employees are eligible to receive earned sick time? Now, if you've been doing a lot of reading online about this, you'll recall that the definition of employee under the Act is very, very broad. And a number of law firms out there have said it's broad enough to cover independent contractors. The definition from the statute is an eligible employee is an individual engaged in service to an employer in the business of the employer. All right, that's a broad definition, and it could theoretically cover an independent contractor. An independent contractor is somebody who provides services to an employer in the business of the employer. Now, I've taken the position all along, and I've got an email to prove it, that this is not intended to cover independent contractors, that it's intended to cover actual employees. And the FAQ kind of clears that up. So the FAQ says, what employees are eligible to receive earned sick time? And the answer is this. An eligible employee is an individual engaged in service to an employer in the business of the employer. And again, that is right from the statute. That's not very helpful. But it's this next part that helps us out. Because the FAQ goes on to say, and from whom an employer is required to withhold for federal income tax purposes. Okay? That settles, I think, the independent contractor question. You don't withhold. A properly classified independent contractor does not have taxes withheld from his or her pay. Federal taxes are not required to be withheld. So this would suggest that independent contractors are not covered. It's just your regular old employees under the Fair Labor Standards Act and under the IRS code. It's employees only, not independent contractors. And then we get some questions, again, like I said, about when does an eligible employee begin to accrue? What's a benefit year? Do you have to allow carryover? And blah, blah, blah. Again, all questions that we already knew the answer to because they come right out of the statute. Then again, we have another question that I think is helpful because we've had a lot of discussion so far about front loading. Remember, under the PMLA, you are specifically allowed to front load. under the Earned Sick Time Act, there is no provision for front loading. The statute doesn't mention it. All it says is you have to accrue earned sick time at a rate of 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. All right? There's an FAQ on that too. And here's what the question is. May an employer provide the total, let's try that again. May an employer provide the total amount of earned sick time all at once? Can you front load? The answer to the question is this. There is no prohibition in the law preventing an employer from providing the total amount of sick time at the beginning of the 12-month period. That would seem to suggest, again, that you can front load. Our good friend Rob DeBow has taken that position all along. Turns out he's right. You can front load. I wasn't sure. I was wrong on this one. You can front load, but there's a proviso to that. There's a condition, okay? You are allowed to front load, but the answer goes on. It says there's no provision, provided it being the employer, complies with the accrual, use, carryover, and other provisions of the act during the benefit period. So what that says to me is this: you can front load, but you still have to keep track of how many hours the employee accrues. And one of the problems with front loading is you don't know how many hours the employee is going to accrue. Remember, if you're a large employer, you have over 10 employees, the employee gets 72 hours each year to use. They might not earn that much, but they get that to use. If you've done the math, you know that if an employee works 2,080 hours, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, they're not going to earn 72 hours. So the question then becomes, how do you front load? Do you just front load the 72 hours and hope the employee earns all those? And if you front load them, once you've given them to them, they've got them. You can't really take them back. Plus, you still have to keep track of how many hours the employee accrues. So you've still got to do the math on your payroll system. You also have to let them use up to 72 hours or whatever they earned. In this case, if you front load 72 hours, it's going to be 72 hours. You have to allow them to carry over. Remember, under the PMLA, if you front loaded, you didn't have to allow carryover. But here, if you front load, you will have to allow carryover and other provisions of the Act, meaning they can use it for the same stuff they could use it under the Act. So you can front load, but you've got to do all these other things in addition to that. And so I think that gets you back to still, how are we going to do this, right? The question is, how are we going to do this? And then the last question that I think is helpful in this FAQ is the question of use. What's the smallest increment of time in which the employee can use the leave? And the statute says they can use it in the smallest, an hour, or the smallest increment that you track time. So the question is this: does earned sick time have to be taken in 1 hour increments? I'm not a big fan of that question, but that's a question we get. And the answer is maybe. Then the state says the Act provides that earned sick time may be used in the smaller of hourly increments or the smallest increment of time used by the employer's payroll system for absences or use of other time. Okay, that's not super helpful, but they give an example. The state then says, for example, if an employer uses 1/10, open paren, 6 minutes, close paren, of an hour for tracking absence attendance, then this would be the incremental use allowed for earned sick time. All right? So if an employee is late, if they're over 6 minutes late, that means an employee can use earned sick time in 6 minute increments. That's what that means to me. Okay, so that's out there. You can go see it. The link is in here. You'll have to pause to get the link, but it's in here. If you have any questions, you should call us. And don't forget, we've got policies for all this stuff that you can purchase from us. So come see us, give us a call your Warner lawyer, and we'll get you the answers you need. And by the way, we do need to give credit where credit is due. The state got these things out early. At least we've got some guidance now on how they're going to implement this. And away we go. We'll see you next time.